on this computer.
We have got the proviso that I have not used this as a presenter's tool before, so please bear with me.
We are a very good audience, Elaine.
Good.
Very patient, and we appreciate your time. You know, you could be spending now in your garden. So good afternoon to everyone, all the students. I haven't seen you today yet. I hope you had a good day. Daniel told me what you were doing at the TIPE and UN workshop. So you were very busy, I heard. This is the series of our guest speaker sessions, and I am delighted to welcome Elaine Callaghan, who is representing RWS Language Solution, Moravia. I never know which one.
We'll talk about that bit, but yes, we'll try and explain.
It used to be Eclipse when I first started working with you,
yeah,
but it has changed. The name has changed, but the people behind it luckily didn't. And Elaine is the interpreting manager, and she deals with all the conference interpreting assignments. But she will tell you more in details who in RWS does what and how the company operates. As far as I know, Elaine also prepared some activities for you so that you don't fall asleep. So we will guide you through them as we go along. But I think I'm not going to take any more time, because what Elaine has got to say is much more interesting and important. And I will give you the floor. Elaine, let me know if you're happy to share the presentation from your end.
Well, give it a go. So share screen. And that's it.
And I will be just here assisting with any technicalities and logistics. So just let me know when you need me.
Whoops, that didn't work, did it? Hang on. Right.
Is your presentation open already on the computer?
It is. I'm just going to try and, yeah, it is. I've just got to get it to share. You said. If not, we have a plan B. Don't worry. Ava's got the presentation. Right. Okay. So can you see that? Can you see my slides?
We can. Yes.
Good.
Perfect.
Okay. Right. Now I don't know what happens if I make it large screen. Let's give it.
Maybe you can just click on the bottom on this. Oh yeah. Go down. Here, just next to minus. If you click on the one on the left side of the minus, the very first one near the minus. Yes, you should have slideshow. Or maybe
there we are. Yep, there we are. Right. Okay, so we're there. Gosh, that's the easy bit. You wait till later on. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me. It's very strange. I've done a presentation before, but never one where there's so many people listening, and normally it's just on a phone, and it's slightly different. So please bear with me. If you've got any questions, Ava, are you in charge of the questions that you can raise hands and that? Thank you.
Yes, so basically we can do it in two ways. We can either ask students to submit the questions to the chat, or students, if you want, you can raise your hand in the, it is in the participants. I'm sure you've done it before, so you can raise your hand if you want to interrupt, if you're happy, Elaine, for them to interrupt you as you go along. I know you like interactive sessions.
Too right, you don't hear me all the time. Yeah, that's right. So please do ask questions. I'll try and make it as clear as I can, but you know, obviously when you're doing it all the time, you don't necessarily, what I think is just without saying doesn't necessarily go. So please do ask questions. It makes it more interesting for everybody. So what Ava asked me to do was talk to me about how, as an agency, we work with interpreters to try and get the best possible solution for our clients. So that's what I'm going to try and cover today. So I thought I'd do a little bit about RWS, the group, so that you can see where we are, because we're quite a big company now. And then talk a bit about how we work with our clients, how we work with how we work with our interpreters, and then talk a little bit about how we can work together, because to me, it's key that, you know, it's not us and the client and the interpreters and the agency and the client are all one big team wanting to get the final goal. So yes, we want to get it right for our client wants it right, but if we don't get it right for the interpreters, then nothing is really as good as it could be. So the whole point is that we work together. And finally, just a quick slide on, if you want to register, how to get in touch with us. I think some of you have already asked to be friends on Facebook, on LinkedIn, so I think you probably started that process anyway, but there we go. So to start off with, RWS, we're a world leader in translation and localization. So across the world, we're divided into 3 groups. So we've got RWS Group, and then we've got 3 divisions. We've got the RWS IP Services, RWS Life Sciences, and RWS Moravia. Now, I'm part of RWS Moravia, but what they've done is they've sort of divided that up into slightly smaller units. So legally, we're RWS Language Solutions, and we're the ones who deliver the interpreting for the whole group. And there's RWS Berlin, which is all the German teams, and RWS Alpha, which is all our legal work. So all of our legal translation, localization is all done in the RWS Alpha. So a little bit about each group, each division. Life Sciences, well, goes without saying, focuses on all of the life sciences work. So they do all of the translation, linguistic validation for any life sciences company anywhere in the world. They don't do interpreting, but anything else to do with the life science industry and languages, that's where they sit. We've then got the IP services, which is intellectual property, and they do all the patent filing, translation, database management, and all that sort of thing. And we've got RWS Moravia. And the Moravia do all the translations for anything that isn't life sciences, really. So some clients fall into 2 or 3 categories, so they may be shared a bit. But Moravia, we've got people like Google, Apple, and any other company that isn't really IP services or life sciences. It's the best way of explaining it. Now, within Moravia, we also have the interpreting team. So the interpreting team, although we're based in Moravia, we actually do projects for anybody in the group who needs interpreting. So if somebody in life sciences in America wants an interpreter, they'd contact us and we'd talk to the client and liaise that way, which is why sometimes you'll find, you know, one minute I'm doing a project with a client on the west coast of America, and then a couple of hours later I'm getting up early to talk to somebody in Japan or something like that. So across the whole group, we specialize in the interpreting. And it could be all sorts of interpreting. It could be legal, it could be conferences, it could be medical, whatever needs doing. So as our group within Moravia, we cover over 150 languages, and we do all sorts of interpreting. Any sort of interpreting that the client requires, we'll support them. Obviously, consecutive and simultaneous are the main ones, with conferences, works councils. What else do we do? Audits, site audits for pharmaceutical work, things like that. We're now looking more at remote interpreting, because obviously nobody is moving anywhere at the moment. It's not just in Europe, it's all over. So we are looking a lot more at doing remote interpreting, and working with a couple of different platforms depending on the reason, on what is actually required by the client. We also get involved in all the equipment rental and setup. So if you've got a conference, the equipment there is also there as well, and we tailor that. So we become a one-stop solution. The way we work is that we work with our clients. So we don't have it's this or nothing. We work with our clients to design the best possible solution. So in some cases, if it's only a short call, it might be just quite regular. It's always like, oh yeah, you've got your forklift truck training today. We'll get you an interpreter. There's not a lot of preparation. But you know, if it's a big conference, we need to understand exactly what they're trying to do. Just saying, oh yes, well, it's a conference, therefore you need a booth and you need this is not how we work with our clients. We make sure we work with them to design what is right for them and as cost effective as possible. We do work with linguists all over the world. One of the key things clients want is to make it as cheap as possible. So the ideal, so an interpreter in Japan probably wouldn't come over to one in the UK because it's not an appointment in the UK because it's not practical unless there's a very good reason. And we do have to follow our ISO 9000 processes as well. So key part of the language industry, key part of Moravia, and offering all of the interpreting side of things. There's 4 of us in our team, well, 3.5 actually. So I'm one of the, Elaine Callaghan, I'm one of the interpreting managers. We've got another interpreting manager called Laura Wilkinson. She looks after a lot of EWCs in various manufacturing industries. Does a little bit of the, and does a lot in Europe and a little bit in the US. Charlotte Johnson is she's with us part-time she spends half her time with us, but she works full-time, so you can contact her anytime. She looks after mainly the public sector type work, or just non-corporate, sort of like, as I say, 1-day training courses or 2-hour HR meetings and that sort of thing. And then we've got Eleanor Nation, who joined us in February. Eleanor's another interpreting manager, but what we're doing with her is she's going to work US hours. So she starts work at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and finishes at 9 o'clock at night. And the reason for that is that we're finding more and more that we're getting a lot of work either with appointments based in America, or with clients who are based in America who want services in the UK or in Europe. And obviously, if you've got somebody on the West Coast who's who wants an interpreter in Europe, there's no point in talking to them when we're at work because they're still in bed. So that's why we've made that change. It's very early days and we're seeing how it goes, but she is working East Coast hours so that we've got a bit of her in the day for us and a bit in the evening. So that's the 3. Unfortunately, I haven't got photographs of all of us, so we've just got to have the characters, which are probably better anyway. So a little bit about what we do in our group. As I said, we provide simultaneous and consecutive interpreting. So we'll advise our clients on that. Some of our clients want a full booths like you've got there on the screen with, the meeting, the booths, and simultaneous interpreting. Some of our clients just want an interpreter, a couple of interpreters do whispered interpreting because it's a small group. Some want a consecutive interpreter for a specific reason. So like I say, whenever a client comes to us, we talk to them about what they want first. We now do remote as well, so we've got lots of different levels of remote interpreting. What we've found is one size doesn't fit all. So we have telephone interpreting if a client just wants somebody on the phone to help with something. Video conferencing, so if somebody wants sort of like to use Skype for the 3-way consecutive appointment, we're doing those. We're doing a lot more remote interpreting, not just because of COVID-19, but also because sometimes it's the most practical. We've got one project we're working on where a client is working to repatriate people, and they just need to catch up with them once a month. They don't need a face-to-face, they just need an hour on the phone. But it needs to be planned, and it needs to be somebody that both the client and the family can trust. So we have a named person who does that work. And that works really well. We just set up a conference call, a bit like on Zoom or something similar, and do that. So remote interpreting, it's coming in. I think it's starting to take off. And I think obviously with COVID, it's going to come in a lot quicker. Although people have been talking about it for years. We look at interpreting equipment, so we've got suppliers across the world we work with to make sure that we've got the right equipment in the right place at the right times. That might be the full interpreting booths, and that as you can see there, it might be a hybrid where there's booths already in the location, they just need the equipment. It might be a tour guide system, might be any mix. It might be sort of a booth with remote interpreting as well tied in. So we just work with our teams across the world to do that. And I'm not directly involved in interpreting, but with what we find with a lot of clients is they don't want to go to one person for this and one person for that. They want the complete service. So what we do with some clients is we'll say, okay, well, you've got your EWC meeting, we know you've got the presentations, let us translate those for you, and not only translate them, we'll then print them, put them in the meeting packs, and then they will deliver the meeting packs to you. And that's something that a lot of customers want to do themselves because it's easier, but there are clients who say, you know what, let's just take that. So we can work with them to provide the service for everything. And the same with the delegate packs, so the note takers as well. A lot of clients have to have a notes of the meetings they attend. Some clients have a have a secretary who takes the minutes. Some clients have said, oh, well, we'll just record everything and then we'll write it up afterwards. What they find is, but sort of a whole 2 days worth of meeting to write the minutes up for that takes ages. So we can offer a service where we've got somebody who comes in and literally takes the minutes, listens to the English channel, takes the minutes, they go away, and the minutes are turned around in 2 weeks. The client hasn't then got to spend 2 weeks of their time typing up or whatever might be. So again, it's another service that we add, and we've got colleagues who are specialists in EWC and things like that, so we can pull them in. Really, I mean, we've got and at the bottom, and the and is whatever a client wants. If it's a service they need tied in with their conference or their meeting and the languages, we can work with them. Either find a friend who does, or talk to them about the best way of dealing with what they want to do. Because what they think might be the best way, like, one client, they said, oh, if we record everything, we can just do the minutes from there. And I was talking to them a couple of months later, and they said, oh, it's taken so long to type up all the minutes because we've had to listen to all of the recording, 2 days worth of recording, and type it. So it's taken weeks. So we work with them to try and find the best solution. So what do our clients expect? Well, as you can see, everything, us supporting them with everything. I think a key one clients expect and want is customer service, an excellent standard of customer service. They want to know if they call in, they're going to get someone they can talk to who knows what they're talking about. They're going to get a response. They're going to get what they need without having to fight for it and go back again. And that's one thing which is key. And it's not just the one person. I mean, we've said one point of contact. They want one person to talk to, but they want to know that whatever happens, they will get that information. So for instance, if one of my clients contacts me and I pass it on to somebody and it's a translation, then somebody else will manage it because I'm not a translation manager. But they know that they'll get the same level of service throughout, and that's not just in the old admin in advance. It's when they're on site. You've got interpreters who care, who do the customer service from their point of view, the technicians who invariably are running around doing all sorts of things. They don't just do the make the sound work on the booths. They tend to get dragged in to help with PowerPoints or turn the air conditioning up or down or whatever it might be, and it's all part of that customer service to do. But they do want one point of contact. They only want to know that they come to RWS, they can get interpreters, equipment, translations, anything they want. And specialist advice as well. It's all part of customer service. They need to be confident that they are getting the advice that they want, which is why we talk to interpreters to make sure that what we're suggesting works. So for instance, if a client wants a certain type of, if they only want one interpreter because they don't understand the reasons for two, we'll explain to them why, for simultaneous you need two. Or if it's a specific case, we can talk to the interpreter and say, what do you think? What can we do? So we work together to ensure we get professional standards. Multiple interpreting styles, whatever fits the receipt. Expense control. Clients are really keen to keep prices down, and I think that's going to be something that's going to be key even more. I mean, not that it hasn't been over the last few years, but even more now as things start to go back, money is going to be tight, so they will be looking at really close expense control, and that's what they come to us for. So we can say, okay, well, this is how much we think it's going to cost, and we'll estimate how much your flights are, but then they expect us to keep to those flights and those costs. So if there's a big surprise, we manage it. We either say to the interpreters, no, you can't take that flight, we're going to have to look at a different version, or we work a way to manage those costs. But it's going to be key, that one, to get expenses down, and all expense on interpreting, equipment and everything. And they want us to schedule it. They want us to be able to reserve interpreters. So they'll work with us to say, in fact, I had a call this morning to say that one client's now decided that their next EWC is going to be in March. So can I reserve the interpreters now? They want that scheduling ability. They won't be able to know that when it comes to March, the interpreters are reserved and ready to go, and they're not running around trying to find somebody at the last minute. And obviously new technologies, there's a lot of them about at the moment, but they want to know that we're keeping up with the latest technology. So that's what our clients expect. They expect us to be up to date, customer service, and professional standard. So the next then, working with interpreters. I think each agency is different and they all work in different ways. What I'm talking about now is how RWS work with agent interpreters. We've developed it over the years, and I think really we've come really close to a lot of interpreters, and we do like working with them. And there are times when we'll just sit and have a chat and not a lot of work gets done, but there we go. So it's how we work with our interpreters. And there's 3 parts to it for interpreters. What do we want from our interpreters as well? It's sort of, that's what it's about. It's what do we want from our interpreters as well as how we work with them. So from an interpreter, obviously we need, key one, interpreting skills. We need, assuming it's going to be mainly into another language from English, because that's mainly what we do, although that is changing. We would need native speakers in the target language. So that's important, because obviously if you've got somebody who mainly is going to listen to the interpretation, they want to know that it wants to be easy to listen to. But we also find it's very important to have a near-native English or source language, because what we find is there are times when it's got to be transferred back the other way, and obviously with relay it's key that we've got that near native. So that's key for us, is the skills in languages. We also need subject specialists. Now I know to start off with maybe you won't have that, but you will very quickly think, oh, once you've done 1 or 2 you'll carry on doing those, so you get that experience. So we do need people who've got experience with EWCs or medical audits, so that when we say to a client, oh yes, we can do that audit for you, we've got somebody who we know understands the terminology, and with audits especially understands the etiquette, understands exactly what it means, because audits can be quite specialized, and they're such a key part to the client that that's what we want. So subject specialists, and it might not always be something as EWCs, medical audits. I mean, they're quite common ones. But if you're a specialist in sports and you know a lot of sports stuff, there's a lot of conferences where you need that specialism. So make sure it's on the CV so that we can see it. Flexibility to work in multiple settings. I think this is one thing that we found over the years, is no 2 conferences are the same. There's always something different, or can you start at 3 o'clock in the morning, or can you do this, or can you do that? And it's a case of, with those skills, can you do that? Can you be in the booth and then come out of the booth because they've got they're doing a breakout group and they need somebody to help with the breakout groups, where you can't use the move. We had one series of projects a couple of years ago where it was distributed training for a car manufacturer, and that was, the flexibility required in that was amazing. They started off with a technical presentation in the booths, then they went and did a presentation on the side of a racetrack, so using tour guide systems, and then they had to get in the cars and go and because there's like they had a test drive, so there was like a convoy of cars, and they had an interpreter in the front car with the trainer, and then they were on radio mics then, so if somebody had a question in one of the other cars, there would be a radio mic and they'd be interpreting that way. Then they had to work at dinner, and so that was another different type, and this was all in 4 days. So, and then there was a workshop at the end where they had to build a car, and the interpreters had to support building this pretend car. So it's not just, can you work in a booth? It's all the other bits that go with it. Another conference we had was for firemen who were working on more fires on the moors. So they had to do the booth work when they were doing the theory sessions, but then one day they had to go up onto the moors and watch a fire and watch them put out the fire. So they're tour guide and that. So 1 minute they're in their smart business clothes, the next they're in wellies and getting blown about and amongst the smoke. So it's all around the flexibility of what we can do, and we do try and get interesting projects. We do try and get them a bit more interesting rather than just in the booth all the time. We always ask interpreters to sign confidentiality agreements. We do need to make sure that you've got the relevant security clearance. That might be something as simple as a DBS check. It might be something much more complicated for some of the MOD stuff. And we also need to check that you've got the right to work in the country that you're in. So for instance, at the moment, if you're in Europe, it's okay working in the UK. Who knows what's going to happen when everything else is sorted out? So, that's the sort of thing that we need to know, where you can work, what authorizations you've got. And it's really good if you're a sort of member of IEC or the ITI or CIOL or any of those. Again, accreditations are good because then we know that you've got that confidence, and we can be confident in your skills. And it's always important to keep your CPD up to date. You never know what it might be, and it's not always logical stuff. It's sometimes something might come up and you think, oh yeah, that's good to know that they can do that. I can't think of one off of hand, but there's all sorts that just make sure that you can show that's coming up. And when we look at some CVs, they've done this workshop with IEC and this workshop with ITI, and you think, well, yes, they're that's great because that fits in with what they're doing. So that's really important. Okay. And then there's people skills. Again, that's really important, and it's all around communication. And interpreters really are part of our company. If you're on site, that you're part of RWS. So we would hope that we would expect that you can follow a code of conduct, and you represent the company. And it's the clients do rely on you a lot, and sometimes they're in and out of booths all the time. Other times you may not say much, but they do notice what you're doing, and yeah, we do get feedback sometimes. And the other thing is, clients need to be guided. So sometimes I'm trying to think of a good example that's quite diplomatic here, but if you're on site and for some reason you haven't had the documentation, the presentation that's coming out, you haven't had it, it is key you get it, and we realize that. But there's ways of talking to a client to ask for it. So if you're on site and you haven't had it, it's a case of when you're talking to the client, guide them to give you that, rather than saying I have to have it now. And that's all around interpersonal skills and just working well and building relationships with your clients, and as well building relationships with your project managers and your other interpreters. We just need to work well together, and we try really hard to do that. There are times when we may make decisions that you may not like, but they normally come from the right place, that it's no choice. But it's a case of talking those through and getting a common agreement, rather than just saying, okay, this is what it's going to be. And you find that if you build your relationships with your agencies, things get easier. So for instance, you might have booked a flight and then realize that actually you've got something, you want to change it. If you've got that relationship with an interpreting manager, say, look, I've got a problem here, I should have done this, but I can do that, how can we work together? You're more likely to get a response than to say, well, I can't do it. And then next time you've got that, get over that hurdle to whatever. I mean, I have had interpreters who've had to pull out at the last minute, and yet I've still used them on following jobs because of the way they've done it and the way the relationship we've had and we've worked together, that I know it's a genuine reason why they've had to pull out, and that makes it easier. So spending time working with your project managers is really good. You need to have some empathy. You need to understand where the client's coming from. In some cases, they can be very frightened about having to talk through somebody else. And that is really hard. I mean, if you're doing a medical appointment, they've got to talk about something very personal. You need that empathy. You've got to be neutral. Completely agree that, but you just need to be able to understand where they're coming from and how they're feeling. And punctuality is key. I mean, it all goes without saying, really, but yeah, we need you to be punctual. You need to be on time, so that so that the client then is confident they can carry on with what they're doing and not thinking, oh, where's the interpreter? And that's not just the first time, it's when you're in the booths. So if you've had a coffee break, or if it's first thing in the morning, or if you've had your lunch, not leaving it to the very last minute, because obviously if you're not there, the conference can't start, and the client then is getting more tense because they need to keep to their time things. Ethics, all again part of the code of conduct. You need to stay neutral. You need to be able to say neutral and not get involved. I know it's really hard not to get involved. I do all the time, but try not to get involved and to remain calm. I think interpreters often, I don't know whether they ever agree with me on this, but you almost seem to be like a swan where you're nice and graceful on top and you're paddling like hell underneath, because that's what you are doing. And it's the same with everybody, and we're all doing the same, but just look calm. And then even if there's some crisis going on, the client thinks, okay, well, everything's under control. They know what they're doing. So that's the people skills. I don't always do them, but you can try. So all of those, a lot of these things I've already said, but around working with the agency, communication between your agency and you is key. And it works both ways. It's us being communicating with you as well as you communicating with us. But you need to keep each other updated all of the time. It's not just, it's great to say, yes, I can do that job on the 5th of December and it's now June. And a lot of it you don't talk for months, but just every so often just check in and say, okay, I'm here. Or, you know, the agency might say, well, we've got this and we've got that. Just keeping that communication line going. And when you are getting nearer, you know, when they ask for the flight times and all that, working with them, giving deadlines of when you're going to get it done by. It's easy to think, oh, I've got to look at that flight detail. I'll do it tomorrow. But sometimes by that time, the flights have changed, the costs have changed. So agencies will say, you know, I need to know by this date what flight you want to take so I can approve it. And it's a case of understanding that they've got deadlines as well that they need to do and negotiating with those. So if really you can't get it done by then, it's much better to come back and say, oh, I know you want that flight by tonight, but I'm actually in Singapore. I can't look at it because of whatever until tomorrow, but I will get back to you then. And get back to you then. We can work with that. We can deal with it. We can come up with a solution like, well, okay, well, I'll look and I'll put this price in and then we can change it if it's not. But if you just say, yeah, I'll do it now, and then we don't hear anything, that's really hard. So it's effective communication, and it works both ways. And we all try really hard to make sure we are communicating. There are times, but it's just giving that, yeah, I haven't forgotten you, or thank you, or whatever. Time management, obviously, like what we're saying. Be responsive. Now, there are different agencies work different ways, I know, but our agency, and I can only go on our agency, if we've got a job, we will only ask the number of interpreters we need for it. So if it's a booth, we will ask 2 interpreters. If those 2 interpreters aren't available, then we will ask whoever isn't available. So we've always got those things. What we don't do is say, I've got a job tomorrow, and send it out to all of our interpreters and say, I've got a job tomorrow. So that's how we work. Unless we will do that if it's a job tomorrow, we probably would actually say, I'm telling you now, I'm asking everybody because it's such short notice, but that's how we work. It's down to you to be responsive and come back quite quickly as soon as you can, even if it's a yes, no, maybe, give me 5 minutes, give me an hour, or whatever, because we will wait, but we won't wait forever. So we might come back and say, I haven't heard from you. If I haven't heard from you by lunchtime tomorrow, I'm going to go elsewhere. So it's just a case of letting us know and trying to respond so that we can carry on and get out of it. There are times when, you know, we don't send a quote unless we've got a resource in place, there are sometimes we do, but as a rule we wouldn't, because there's no point in saying to the client, yes, I can do it for this price if I've got no one there. So again, if we're waiting to send our quote because you're really slow coming back to us, that can be a bit of a challenge. Not impossible, we deal with it, but ideally, if you can be responsive, that's great. Fair and flexible. Now, the rates come into play here. We don't expect you to work for nothing. Well, no, we don't expect you to. But there are times when we might be saying our client will only do this rate. And we're being honest with you to say that's what we can do. If you don't want to do it work that's fine. That's your decision and we completely accept it. But, you know, if you can be flexible, I mean, if we say, you know, the absolute rate is this, and you say, well, I can't do that, but I could do this, getting that flexibility is really important. One thing that is also important for clients is location, where you're based, because one of the things they have to pay for is travel. So if you're if you're spending a fortune on travel because you live in, I mean, I'll give you an example. I've got somebody who lives in the Lake District. It costs them £100 to get to the local airport by the time they put everything, well, maybe £50-60 before they get to the airport, so that they can then fly to wherever. Well, that's a lot of money when you add that up to everything else. So if you are going to live somewhere like that, you almost need to make a decision on what you're going to do about getting places. And it's also around time as well, because if you are miles and miles from an airport, you know, a lot of clients now don't like to pay a travel day because it's a cost that they can say, well, if you buy the airport, you should be able to get there. So if you're living a long way, that may affect how many jobs you actually get. I'm not threatening you or anything like that. I'm just saying this is something to be aware of, that if you are a long way from an airport, you need to think about how you structure your rates so that you take that into account. So you may want to say, okay, well, my rate is going to be this. I won't charge a travel day, but I've got to be aware of that. So it's just a case of thinking about your location when you're starting to work. And, you know, do you want to be in the centre of London? Do you want to live next to Heathrow Airport? I mean, there's pros and cons for both. But, you know, if you want to live somewhere more remote, how are you going to get to the airport? You know, if it's a 6 o'clock flight, do you really want to do that every morning? Because, you know, once a week you're going to be flying to, say, Paris, and you've got to get there at 6 o'clock in the morning to get the flight, which means you've got to get up at 4 o'clock. If you want to do that, that's great, but you need to think about it. We do need you to manage budgets. Now, with flights, some companies I know organise all the flights for them, for interpreters. Some companies say you just get on with it and we'll pay your invoice afterwards. It's a case of managing the budgets. If you book in a flight, you need to make sure that you've got that in your back of your mind. Is okay. So I might say, well, you've got £250 to pay on your flight. Just make sure you come in on that rate if you can. If you can't, again, as long as you're talking about it, that's fine. But you need to agree budgets and keep to them. And you need to know, and if you're going to work from home on remote interpreting, which I think a lot of you probably will at the moment, you need to make sure you've got the right equipment. Some platforms vary, but you certainly need to make sure that you've got equipment that works for the platforms and that you're confident using it. Because that's one key thing we found, is that, you know, it's no good saying, oh, well, I've got Wi-Fi, so Wi-Fi is fine. Wi-Fi is not good for most of the platforms, because you miss the odd word, and when you're interpreting, as we know, that's key. You need a good microphone, you need a good pair of headsets, and you need to make sure you've got somewhere quiet where you're not going to have somebody running in, just looking behind her thinking, I hope he didn't come in now. But yeah, you know, sort of, so you need to think about that when you're getting yourself set up. Have you got what you need? I mean, each platform's different, but, you know, have a chat with one of the agencies. They'll give you an idea of what you need. And I'm sure, Ava, you've done loads now, haven't you? You're an expert, so you can tell them exactly what they need. Okay, so challenges to most of these you probably know better than I do. This is just some of the challenges we've got to, you know, when I started doing this job 10 years ago next week, I think it is, it was very different. Remote didn't exist. So there are a lot of challenges, and, you know, your new interpreters, they probably won't be challenges to you because you've seen them. But, you know, for a lot of agencies there and clients, they are challenges. I mean, obviously, at the moment, it's everything's remote. And how do we do remote? Do we do remote on everything? Do clients have to say, no, there's some things we can't do? Do they have to say, we're going to have an interpreter here, so you're going to have to get togged up? You know, for instance, if it's in a police station, you've got a mental health act assessment. Do you as an interpreter want to go? And some of it is down to the current situation, and we've got to work out the best ways forward, but some of it's down to you as interpreters working out what your values are and whether you want to do it. I had a call last week from social services to say, could I provide an interpreter to a police station for somebody who needed a mental health act assessment? So it was down to the interpreters to decide whether they wanted to go or not, and 3 out of 4 said didn't want to go because they felt it was unsafe because there was no PPE. They did offer telephone interpreting as an alternative, or remote interpreting over Skype. One of them was prepared to do it, but then had some of her equipment, and she said she was going to do it. So it's a case of thinking about what you're happy with, because we'd never push you to do anything. We might ask you very strongly, but we won't push you to do it. But you need to know what you would do in the situation, especially in this current situation. Like I said, there's always challenges on budgets, but I think that over the next few years, that's going to be even more challenging. Even I think some of the pharmaceutical companies might cut down a bit on their challenges. And a big challenge, clients' understanding of interpreting. And I'm sure you get over this quite a lot, but well, you can speak another language, can't you? That's fine. It doesn't work like that. And that's the agency's role to explain that. But it is a challenge. And it's around, you need 2 interpreters for one person if you're going to do simultaneous. We all know how important it is, but that's the challenge, to get the clients to understand that. The other thing that clients are doing is trying to make shorter conferences. So instead of having 2 days, they might have 1 day, or they might have 2 days, but you don't start till lunchtime, and then you finish at lunchtime the next day, allowing everybody to travel in the morning and go home in the evening, which is great. But then the argument is, well, you're only interpreting half a day, so that's all we're going to pay. The other one to think about is, while you're remote interpreting, is, well, you're at home, you're not traveling, you don't need to build time in for that, so we just want an hourly rate. And even a lot of companies now, when we're doing tenders and that, the really big companies, they're assessing it on an hourly rate. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's a completely different subject, and if we go down there, we'll be there all night. But it's something you need to be aware of, that these questions are coming in, and these questions are coming more and more. Is, why do we pay so much on interpreting? And I think they are challenges that I'm sure everybody would agree is ones we don't necessarily want to go with, but we are having to address them all the time. So you've got shorter lead times as well, another challenge, and free structure we talked about. And the other thing is, some agencies do offer less skilled interpreters, so you're competing against those, and that can be a challenge as well, because we don't do that. We don't, if you need to legally, if you need a core interpreter, we will put one in. But there are clients there are agencies that just say, oh well, she can speak the language, we'll put her in. There is a knock-on effect, but it's a challenge because it affects everybody, and that's the sort of challenges we're looking at. So I don't want to paint a really bad picture, but those are things you need to be aware of, so that when you're talking to agencies and when you're talking to clients, you're putting those, you've got those in the back of your mind, so that when you're making arguments of why you're going to charge all day, you know where they're coming from, and it's all down to budgets and understanding, and that's key. So as you can see, basically as an agency, we're trying to walk the middle way. We're trying to keep your interpreters happy, so try and get as much money as we can for you, and keep the clients happy by making it as cheap as possible for them and as effective as possible for them. And we're in the middle trying to balance it all right. So we try very hard to do that, because we'd rather have everybody happy. But if we ask questions, there are questions for a reason. And yeah, that's the role of agency in a nutshell, just to be the point of contact for the clients. Do the things that, if they've got 20 interpreters, it's easier for them to come to us, and we can qualify all those interpreters than them doing it individually. So that's the sort of where we are in there, trying to keep everybody happy. So very quickly, registering. Now I've just tried to do this quite generally, but it does cover what we want to do. I would say you need to look at the agencies you want to register with to see whether they're actually what you want. You may get them coming to you and you can make that decision, but think about what you want out of an agency. If you're happy to take, and there is, I know, you've got to pay the bills at the end of the day, so you may not have a choice, but think about what you want out of an agency. If you want somebody, if you want them on your side, if you just want them to pay the money, and check things with other colleagues. Do they pay their bills on time? Do you have to jump through hoops to get there? It's the sort of things that you know, the money sounds great. You know, if they're offering a really high rate, that's great. But just make sure that's the other side of it. You know, they may say, yes, I will pay you a high rate, but then you find that their payment terms are 90 days or something like that. That's fine, as long as you're happy with that. And I'm guessing, Eva, if you talk to other interpreters, they've got a pretty good idea which ones to work with and which ones not to. Would that be?
Definitely. The word spreads very fast.
I thought it might. So yeah, so yeah. And if you have got an agency you like working with, and there's somebody and a really good interpreter, then recommend them, because we would rather have recommendations from interpreters than go out and just recruit blind. Because if Ava recommends somebody, she's not going to recommend anybody that's no good, because it reflects on her. So if Ava says that Fred Blogs is brilliant, then, you know, I'll be knocking on this door saying, oh, would you like to come and join us? So it works two ways. Okay. So when we register, we'll need your CV. Last year we did something on CV, so we're not doing it this year, but think about, if you were being interviewed, what would you want to know on what if you were interviewing yourself, what would you want to know on that CV? And make it easy to read, so that, you know, you've got your education, you've got your skills, you've got your memberships, that's key. You've got your one thing that a lot of people don't put on, which is quite interesting, is your A languages and your B languages. Make it really simple to see where they are, so that we know what languages you're interpreting in. Because sometimes people will just put, I've got a degree, I've got this, I've got that, and I've worked in this job, and you're searching all the way through and you can't find the language. And we can ask you, but when you're looking back at a couple, it's always worth having. Also, I would suggest ordering it by specialism. So if you've got, you know, like a section on, say, legal, and you've done court, you've done magistrates and whatever, so make it, the CV is something that sells you, so you just need to make sure it's easy to read and gives a lot of information. We'll also need to know your rates, and that's like your ideal rates, realistic ideal rates. We may then come back and say, on this job we can't do that. We'll negotiate with you to see what you will do, but we need to know what your rates are so that we know roughly what we're looking at. We'll ask you to sign some terms and conditions and a confidentiality agreement. I would say read the terms and conditions and make sure you're happy with them. And if you're not happy with them, just query them. It doesn't mean to say that you've got to change them, but make sure you understand them. So it's just like reading the small print. We will ask for references. If you're a member of something like the ITI, then we don't need one reference. But if you're got no members, we'd need 2 references. And we go and ask the referees for just some feedback on your services. Interview is a bit of a grand word. We'll talk to you on the telephone. We'll talk to you about what you do. Sometimes it'll be a formal interview. Sometimes it might not be. Just depends on the situation. But we will want some sort of evidence and experience, so certificates and a rough idea of, say, of what you've done. We don't formally, but we do need to know that you've got a right to work. So at the moment, if a student contacts us about interpreting, we tend to check very carefully to see whether they've got a student visa or whether they've got a visa that allows them to work. So just know that, as I say, memberships. And again, keep in touch. Everybody, it's natural. Everybody does the same. They're like, okay, well, you know, I've got this French job. Oh, I'll use so and so and so and so, because I've always used them. They're always there. And sometimes I might get an email that says, "Oh, don't forget me. You know, I emailed my CV last year, just checking you're all right. Thought you'd like to know that I've just worked for the Queen," or whatever it might be. And then if I'm looking for a French one and my regular one's not around, I think, well, hang on a second, I saw that. So just because you're on a database, a nudge every so often is a good idea, but not every week. You just need to, it's a you know, every so often, Christmas card, Easter card, maybe once, sort of, if something major happened. I had one interpreter email me the other week, just that, you know, I'm now a member of AIC, you know, and just those things, just little things, but it's getting the balance right. And I can't tell you what the balance is because it depends where I am, but you know, if I get an email once a month, it's like, no, that's too much. So just think about how you'd want to be contacted, but do keep in touch, especially if something changes significantly. You know, if for instance you live in London and you're going to move to Birmingham or something like that, or you live in Birmingham and you're going to move to London where there's more work, then that is really good to know. And it might just be the job that, and once you've done one job, you might find, oh, you know, you'll be used again and again because you've got that you've got in there, get your foot in the door. It's quite hard, quite easy, quite something that's a bit of a challenge. So that's registering. I mean, there's all sorts of ways of doing it, but that's the sort of thing we'd be looking at for us. And we will want some experience as well. So we would be looking for between 3 and 5 years experience of working in the booth. But, you know, it depends. I mean, for instance, if you've got a booth partner who's very experienced and says, you know, well, in this job, because I know her really well, why can she come and work with me? Then that's an option. So you may want to have some, like we did that with Ava. She had a job and she said, well, I'll work with somebody else, so that we could actually bring somebody on and get that experience, because it is hard to get experience. We do realize that, but when you're on your own, it's just getting it right. And it could be that, you know, we just do small jobs to start with. So if we just say an hour's job, got you free, then take it. I mean, the interpreter who's just qualified to get an IEC, she started with us about 8 years ago, and she was literally doing doing consecutive interpreting for an Interreg project, which was all around sustainability. And she was in farms doing, you know, just helping the local mayor and that. And as she got the experience, we got to know her and we knew how flexible she was, and it's just grown from there. So you never know what you might end up with. Okay, so that's enough of me talking. We need a break. Hang on a second, we do, because I'm about to cough. So I hope, has anybody got any questions first? Nobody said anything. If I just talked and can't start get a word in edgeways, I expect.
If you wish to say something or ask Elaine something about registering or anything else, it's probably good time now. I can't see anybody raising hands.
We've worn them out.
I thought there would be lots of questions, to be fair, but nothing yet.
No.
Oh,
Okay.
I think Iba, are you raising? Okay, because I can't see everyone.
Yeah, if that's okay.
So yeah, if you wish to speak, just switch on the mic.
Okay. Thank you very much, Elaine. That's very, very useful information. It's really nice to hear that your agency takes the initiative to tell the clients about the role of the interpreter, to explain to them, because oftentimes the client just doesn't have a proper idea of what an interpreter should do and can do and what cannot do. How has their response been to you, and do they have follow-up questions on that? I mean, how did you find that experience of explaining to them?
A lot of depends how long they've worked with interpreters. If it's somebody who's very new, who's never worked with an interpreter before, then you can explain to them, and they will listen and they will take note. If you've got somebody who's worked with interpreters before, who thinks they've worked with interpreters before, they can be more challenging. It's like everything else, you've just got to build that relationship. So if you know, I've got a client who 10 years ago when I took over the job, we took on a contract they didn't want to pay any money for interpreting. Interpreting was like, no, we don't want to pay for it, but the law says we've got to have interpreters for our EWCs, and that's literally how it was. And I don't know how they'd agreed to this, but what they'd agreed to was that they would have one interpreter per language for their EWC, and that interpreter wouldn't. The deal was that they weren't going to provide simultaneous whispered interpretation for 4 days. They'd just support the client, just support their representative. And it was a nightmare because it was really hard. But to be fair, some of the delegates could speak perfect English, but because of the situation with the unions and everything, they insisted on having an interpreter. So it started off that it was okay, and then as things changed, it was a case of working with the interpreter, and it's like a dripping tap. You start off saying, well, you know, with the client rather, they can't do this. We're going to have to charge more. If they're going to work on their own, we're going to have to up the rates, which is one way of doing it. And we got to the stage where they agreed that they could have a interpreting booth and 2 interpreters for the days when the management were presenting. So it's a case of dripping tap and explaining and constantly going back and saying, this isn't working and it's not fair, and we're gonna have to look at the rates. And that's where it comes in with the interpreters. Some interpreters were quite happy because they knew their agent, that when it was the red delegate they've been working on for years, then they could do it. You know, they were quite happy because, you know, they knew that he understood exactly what was saying. So basically they just were there to support. But when that delegate changed and nobody could understand and couldn't understand anything, it was a case of, this delegate's changed, we can't do that service anymore, we've got to change it. And that's the case of when we need to talk to the interpreters, to the client rather. I mean, it did get quite lucky in much as the client, the specific one left, and so we could go in there with a new one and say, now this is how it should be run. And then it's been cancelled because of COVID-19, and it's just like, I got there and it's not going to happen. But so it's a case of working together. And it's, you know, the interpreter, they were brilliant because they were so flexible, but they may have been a little bit too flexible. You know, so my experience, it's a case of keep on and working with the interpreters. So you're going to be on site with them. So if you have got problems, I mean, it's down to you building that relationship as well. Most interpreters, most clients, once they've seen interpreters in a booth and how fast they talk and what they're dealing with, they come back with this like, wow, how do they do it? And that's the time to catch them and say, well, we could do it even better if you did this. It's education, and it's, I wish I knew what the answer was, but I just keep talking to them or at them. Maybe it's talking at them that's the trick. I don't know, but yeah, it is talking to them and making sure you're on the same hymn sheet as the interpreter. So if you're saying that the interpreter, if you're telling me that the client just doesn't get it, and they're going on and on and on, and they're not stopping and not giving me breaks, I don't know that unless you tell me. And then if you tell me, I can do something about it. So it could be that you're in a booth. I mean, I have had sort of interpreters send me messages or texts, Elaine, they won't shut up. It's overtime time. What do we do? Or Elaine, can you tell them to turn the microphones on because they're not, or whatever it might be. So you're telling me, and I can work with the client. Sometimes I might ring the client and say, stop now. Other times I might say, well, keep going, and I'll send them an email so that we can discuss it afterwards. It's working together.
I think, Elaine, you're actually doing one more thing that not many companies are doing. You actually go and physically, you or your colleagues, you come and meet the client, meet the interpreters, which is nice, because it does build that relationship with all the stakeholders. So
yeah, we do try to. It depends. A lot of it depends on whether the client will pay for us to go or let us go in. Some of them are more keen to meet us than others, but I'm based down south now, so I do go to some of them. Yeah, but it's all down to relationships. That's all it is. Makes a huge difference.
We've got another question, since I'm kind of trying to moderate. Elena Dubita. I let you, Elena, actually ask the question. I can see the question, but why don't you show yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Elaine, for the presentation. I have many questions, actually.
All right.
I will start with the first one. So what are the languages most in demand? Like, what do you feel your clients are looking more after?
No, it comes in phases. It's really weird. We'll have a phase when everybody wants Chinese, and every time you pick the phone up, it's Chinese. Then all of a sudden, it'll be Russian, or it'll be. I think at the moment it's really difficult to tell. I would say there's no languages that we don't get. We've got more interpreters of some of them, so that makes it easier. But I wouldn't say there's a specific language that is really, really always in demand. It does change. I mean, the standard ones, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Polish, we get a lot, but it just varies on each client. I mean, I've got German wasn't that popular, but we're getting more of it. So I can't say I always need this language. It's a really hard one to answer, and I don't know what the answer is. I mean, one of my managers said to me, we need interpreters in the States. Go and find interpreters in the States. It's like, well, okay, what languages? Well, I don't know. What languages do you think? And I'm like, well, yeah, we've got some Russian, but where are they? And that's the other thing. It's not just a case of what language, it's where are they based. I mean, we went through a phase of Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, week after week. I haven't had one of those for months. I don't know why. I don't know whether they all come out of the woodwork at a certain time and then go away again. I have no idea. But I think all language, I mean, we don't need a lot. We don't use a lot of Danish, Norwegian, Swedish, but then there aren't a lot of interpreters around. So it's one of those sort of strange ones. But yeah, it's really hard to tell, I'm afraid.
What about Italian, Elaine? Because we've got a big group of Italian A's.
I know, I was thinking that.
To be honest with you, when I go for interpreting assignment, every single job there is an Italian booth.
Yeah,
really
yeah.
good.
Italian is popular. Yeah, you're right. But it's not. I wouldn't say it sticks out as popular. I guess it depends on the clients you've got. I mean, a lot of our clients have got Italian areas, but there are other ones that haven't. I think we see a lot because we do a lot of EWCs. Well, EWCs, you're going to have European languages, but outside of EWCs, it does vary. I mean, Russian, Korean, Japanese are all important for audits, for pharmaceutical site audits. The Russian auditors are all over the place. A lot of them in America, but if you've got an American manufacturing company over here, then that affects them as well. So if you do pharmaceutical and do audits, we quite often get Russian, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, but sometimes it might be a US auditor coming over to Europe, and then we've had Dutch, French, Italian, Spanish. So yeah, but there is a lot of pharma audits. So if you're sort of one of those languages, they're quite good to have.
Mm-hmm. I think. Thank you, Elaine. I think, Elena, you had some other question, or?
Yes, I do.
Okay, one more for you then.
Okay, one more, just one more. I'm sure my colleagues are also interested, but probably they are shy to ask. So as students, we absolutely have no idea about rates. What does it? I know that they will not be a ready answer, but if you could give us an idea, like what is the starting point for the interpreters that have like 5 years or 3 years of experience, and then what it can be like on average? Or
that's a really difficult one because it depends where you're based. If you're based in Europe, the rates are different to the UK. If you're based in the US, the rates are different to the UK. If you're doing consecutive interpreting, it's different to simultaneous interpreting. A lot of it's down to you. And I'm going to fudge this question, I promise you now. I think the way we do it is if we've got a booth, we will pay the same rate for both interpreters. So if you've got an experienced interpreter you're working with, we would pay the same rate because that's how we work. And that's how the industry should work. Whether it does or not in all cases, I don't know. And that's down to the interpreters to discuss as well. The rates vary. I'm always wanting the lowest rate I can get because I've got to go, like I said, I've got to go back to my client. So the lower rate I can get, the lower rate I can give to my client. They do vary. It does vary for languages. In some countries, it doesn't seem to. So over in Europe, it's a bit more of a general rate over it, but in the UK, it does vary per language. And it's a case of talking to your colleagues and seeing what they're charging, working with them, and what you think is fair for you. But if you undercut your colleagues, you'll soon know about it. I mean, if you're going to, if you're going to undercut your colleagues, I've still got to get somebody else the same rate, and I won't, so that's how it works. And it's go on, Eva, help me out on this one because it's really hard. But
I think this is a very good time for doing those case studies you prepared because they're really hands-on.
True.
And I agree with you. It depends on the booth. In the UK, it depends on the language combination, unfortunately. I think when students ask me in general, I would say that it's good not to go lower than 350 per day. that's when students ask me, that's what I would tell them basically. But I know some agencies pay less than that. Some agencies would be willing to pay that or more. Or it also depends on the assignment, because I tend to, well, recently I've done more and more medical conferences, and I had a very nice job, 5 days, and the client said straight away that they are giving this rate per day, and it was an extremely good rate. But that was in Europe as well, so maybe, you know, that was the European rate. But the medical, I think whenever there is a specialized conference, or there is something more demanding about the job, then you are being paid more. And also when you're chef d'équipe, when you're looking, or liaison interpreter, when you're looking after the whole team and liaising with clients, then you get like a surcharge for that as well. So there is no straight answer, Elena, to that question, because some languages will be offered more, and also it depends on your negotiation skills, because you can't start from the lowest you can go, because then you've got no margin to get down on the rates. And sometimes it's talking with, in my case, I found talking to the clients, direct clients, to the agencies, what is your budget? I've asked that in the past, when a client came back to me and said, this is far too much, far too high. And also direct clients and agencies, but this is opening another completely subject, because some people say, oh, you need to find so many direct clients. And I agree, it's very nice to work with direct clients, but when you work with direct clients, you're responsible absolutely for everything: drafting contracts, signing it, getting some deposit or some down payment for your services, or even the entire payment, because if you haven't worked with the client before, you don't know if they will pay on time. And especially if you're arranging the equipment and organizing other booths, you have to have the money to pay your colleagues afterwards, and because if not, they will talk badly about you. So you spend a lot of time explaining, negotiating, organizing travel arrangements, organizing equipment, whereas when you're working with the agency, everything is actually handed to you on the platter, because the agency chases paperwork, materials for preparation, etc., etc. So there are pros and cons. So as maybe with direct client, you're able to charge much more, but sometimes it may mean that you also have to spend more time, and you've got more responsibility, and more burden is on you. So the rate that I've given you is, like, I would say, it's not good to go under, but there are different situations, as well as if the job lasts for 2 weeks and you've got 10 days of guaranteed work. So there are different things to take into consideration. I'm not sure if that's helpful, Elaine, and if you agree with me.
Yes, I completely agree with everything there, Eva. I think, you know, you're right about the rate. That sort of is a guideline, but there are clients who've been doing it for years who, you know, they won't take that huge jump. But you're right, if you talk about the budget and you negotiate, and you know, I mean, you might find that you almost want to do it job by job basis, rather than saying, I have a set fee with this agency, I have a set fee. Because if you have a set fee, then you could shoot yourself in your foot. You could get higher on a lot of them, but you could get lower on a lot more. So I would say that you need to talk about the budgets, what is needed, what isn't. I find that, yes, some of our EWCs, especially because they don't want to do the jobs, they haven't got the money to do the jobs, but by law they have to. So they really are tight on cost. They don't want to spend it. And, you know, one thing they will do is they'll spend it on the employees, so the employees think they're all having a really good time, but they'll save elsewhere. The other thing is, think about how long it's going to be for and how much preparation you've got to do. You know, you could say to the agency, well, I want this rate, but I'm not going to charge you for travel day. Or the agency could say, well, look, I'm going to have to give you a lower rate, but you've got 3 days work out of it. It's not just a 1-day job, because if you take a 1-day job, potentially then if you've got to travel as well, you can't do a job before the day before or the day after. So there's all sorts of different things. So you just sort of, you know, set a guideline, but you need to think about the whole aspect. And Ava's right. I mean, the agencies do a lot of work. I mean, you may book your flights, you may want to do it yourself so that you've got the control. which, you know, if something goes wrong, in some ways is really good, because, you know, you haven't got to try and get hold of me to get the ticket changed or whatever. You can just get on and do it. On the other side, then, if you haven't arranged how you're going to pay for that flight, you may end up having to pay for it. The job's cancelled, and then you've got this flight you've got to get someone to pay for. So again, it's things you need to think about. So yeah, does that help, Elena? I know it's a very waffly answer between the two of us, but does it help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Good.
I had no idea at all like what aspects we have to look after also at. So yeah, it's very helpful. Thank you.
Good.
I'm conscious of the time. It's we've got 18 minutes left.
18, gosh.
Yes.
I think we'll skip the communication then.
It is really all interesting. I think maybe the case studies would be probably of
I think so. I think that's
interest for the students.
Yeah.
And if you've got any questions and other students have any questions, please, if you could type them, and maybe at the end, I'm just going to see if there is any theme and then ask Elaine.
Right. So, okay. So we were going to do a communication exercise, but we haven't got time for that. So we'll give that one a miss. So what I'd like you to do, Ava, you're going to divide them into 3 groups, isn't it? So I'll talk through.
Yes, so perhaps before you start, Elaine, I'm going to divide you in 3 groups. So if you could possibly on your devices take the screenshot of all 3 scenarios, so that you know, because you know when I send you to the breakout room, you won't see the main screen. So take the screenshot, and Elaine will explain the 3 scenarios, and then we will allocate you the scenario per group.
Okay, so we're going to divide you into 3 groups, and each group is going to have about 5 minutes to talk about a scenario, a case reference. And during that time, we'd like you to agree how you'd respond to the client. So when I say the client, it could be the agency. They've come to you with this request. We need to know what questions you'd ask, what conditions you would discuss with the client, and funnily enough, how you'd structure your rates. Now, I'm not asking for exact figures, because like we said, it's a bit of a movable feast, but how, you know, would you charge a full day? Would you charge half a day? Would you charge travel time? Would you charge overtime? And all that sort of thing, just so that we've got an idea. So those are the questions in your group you need to come up with. Okay, so the first scenario, and these are all true scenarios, I think Ava's probably had most of them. So the first one is a client in the chemical industry based in Harrogate, and they're running a distributors training event. So it's over 3 days. The distributors are salespeople and also technical people. The event's going to be 9 till 5 every day. There's going to be about 20 delegates in total. There'll be some from France, some from Germany, and some from Poland, I think. And the structure of the day is plenary sessions, so some main sessions, and then practical demonstrations and training workshops in smaller groups. There'll be discussion and that. Client's not got a lot of money, and they're going to do it on site, on their factory site. So the room's not big enough for booths, but they want simultaneous interpreting. In addition to the room not being big enough for booths, they don't want to use booths. They've got their own tour guide system that they use for going around the factory. But they think that obviously 3 interpreters in the same room, as the plenary room will be very noisy for the interpreting when it's in the main group. So what they've said is, can the interpreters be outside the room and use the equipment? So they think it'll work. They haven't checked it, but they think it'll work.
So the question is, what do we ask the client? Yeah.
What would you as interpreters want to know before you say yes or no? So I've come to you to say, will you do this job for me? Are you available? I need to know what you would want to know from me. So would you want, would you say, yeah, that's fine, Elaine, I'll do it, no problem. I'll see you next week. Or would you say, oh, hang on a second, what about this? What about that? So just the questions you would ask so that you were happy with doing it, and whether you thought I'd thought about all the different aspects of that job.
And I already know who will be doing the first one. It's Ami, Iba, Harry, and Lavinia. So this is for you. And actually, I cannot send you yet to the breakout room. Elaine, if you could tell us the request number 2, and the request who will be for Elena, Wheeling, and Luca, Elena Dubita.
Okay, so this one is a pharmaceutical client, and this isn't actually straightforward interpreting. So as part of a clinical trial, they've got to interview, people have got to interview the patients on what they've done. So the interviews have to, by law, be in the language of the patient. So we're going to be Spanish in this case. And there's going to be a series of interviews, and each interview is going to last about an hour. So they're going to record these interviews in Spanish. So there's two people talking, the patient and the interviewer. The clients ask for an interpreter to record a simultaneous interpreting of the information into English. So what they want to do is they want an interpreter to watch the video and record a simultaneous interpretation of it into English, so that the client can transcribe it. So what will happen is the client will send an MP3 file to the interpreter. So you'll get the recording, and then you need to record the simultaneous interpretation, send it back to the agency, and then the agency will transcribe it into English, and then they'll send it back to you to say, okay, here's your English transcription, here's the recording again, can you just check that the English transcription matches what is being said in Spanish or whatever language it is. Sign a document for this. Okay. The turnaround time is you'll get a week to do the recording, so you won't have to do it straight away. When you get the first one, you've got a week to record the interpretation, but the client wants to keep it minimum, so they're only going to pay 2 hours for the recording and an hour for you to check it, because each thing's about an hour long. Okay. Oh, and one other thing, because there's two people but one interpreter, they want you to change your voice so that when the interpreters ask questions, you might talk in a different tone of voice to when the client answers. Okay.
Thank you. So that is for Amin, Elena Dubita, Huiling, and Luca. And the last one, request 3.
And the last one this is a remote interpreting one. Okay. So we've got a client in the manufacturing industry who is very, 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 very cost conscious, needs to organize an online steering committee. So steering committee is part of the UWC thing. It's a smaller group, 6 languages. There's about 15 people, I think. It's only going to be from 2 o'clock to 3:30, so a very short meeting. It's going to be using an online platform, which is a recognized online platform. You're going to be working from home using Relay. It's Interprefy, so you've got a good system. But part of it you've got to do a training, and you've got to do a 2-hour training in advance. You have to provide certain equipment and with software, which I've given you a rough idea there. And you've got to allow access to TeamViewer, which is allows people to go in and look at your system. Okay, so the question is, as I said, the client's very cost conscious. You're only working for an hour and a half, so they don't want to pay a full day rate. So that's the question. What would you do? What would you say? Would you say yes? Would you say no? Would you say but? Would you want more information? Just those are the questions, really.
Thank you, Elaine. So for the last one, it's Alessia, Elena Oyus, Laura, Magda, and Martina. Elaine, the Zoom has allocated you to the second scenario, so you can listen to one group. Okay. I'm going to send everyone. We are giving students 5 minutes, right?
I think so. I think that'll be enough time to do it, yeah.
Okay, so make sure that in your group, there is one person that will later on feedback to others, and that you give everyone voice to add, to chip in. So I'm going to open all the rooms, and in 5 minutes, I will bring you back, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
That went quick.
That went very quick, I know.
Okay, right. Well, we had a good discussion, and we had a good discussion in our group. So let's go back to, if I can get back to the that's not the right one, it's that one I want, isn't it? Let's go back to the presentation. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So request 1 then. Gonna get there? There we are. Let me do that. There we are. So request 1. This was the chemical industry in Harrogate. What did the group think about that one? What sort of questions? Is it the right thing to do? Do you need more information?
Which group was it? Was it Ami? Were you in that group?
Ami, myself, Eva, and Lavinia.
Fantastic. Who would like to take the floor?
I think Ami and I will maybe share because Eva and Lavinia are having some connection problems.
Okay, go on then.
We said that we weren't entirely sure on, because it just says including some delegates from France, Germany, and Poland, that we weren't entirely sure how many interpreters would be coming from those countries, and sort of the topic and how much we'd have to interpret, and how many interpreters we need from our end was a doubt of ours. Also a concern of ours was the pay, and also the travel there and back, in terms of how many days we would be there for. Well, 3 of the main questions. We obviously weren't familiar with the equipment. We didn't know how good the equipment would be, so we would like to know a bit more about that.
Ami?
Yes, and also it mentions that we will be in a separate room to interpret, simultaneous interpreting. So we would like to know the working conditions in that room. How we going to work with a partner? We don't know how many booth partner, language partner we will have, and also it says it's a budget assignment, but we don't know exactly how much they are willing to pay. So we would like to know that, and also because we don't know exactly what this assignment is going to be about. So we would we receive a brief agenda and how we going to travel to this location. If for example, if it's we're going to say a factory for this discussion, are they going to provide a special coach bus to go there? We don't have many information about that. Yes.
That's brilliant. That's really good. Yeah, I think that certainly is the questions that I've been asked. The one question that nobody picked up in is, you've got to be in Harrogate on Monday morning at 9 o'clock. You're going to have to go up on Sunday night.
Do we know where Harrogate is?
There is that question, yeah.
In Yorkshire.
North Yorkshire, yeah.
So it's North Yorkshire, so it's a couple of hours from London.
It's where they make the best tea.
Around the corner from me, Elaine.
It is. Well, you didn't go, did you? So yeah,
I did go. Yeah.
I know. I mean, you didn't have a travel day, but that is one thing you'd need to think about. Are you prepared to go on a Sunday night and not get paid for a travel day, or are you going to say, if I go up on Sunday night, I want to be paid for my time traveling? That's one question you'd need to ask. You're right about the groups. How big are they? You know, if you've got 20 delegates and there's one French guy and everybody else is and the others are all, and more of the other ones, you're still going to need 2 interpreters per session. But you know, how are you organizing the breakout groups? You know, if it's chemical industry and it's practical demonstrations, do I need any special kit? Am I going to have to wear protective gear? You're right to ask about the booths. How's that going to work? Have you tried it out? What's it going to work for me? So yes, the things you've come up with are really good. But as I say, the key one is about travel. How are you going to do that? You're right to say, how am I going to get there? But there's 2 parts to how am I going to get there. How am I going to get to Harrogate, and how am I going to get backwards and forwards to the meeting. And also around accommodation, you know, are you paying for my accommodation? Have I got to sort that out? Have I got a budget? So you're exactly right. And it was a really good point about documentation. This, it says it's chemical and it says it's distributor training. That is not going to be,
Easy.
this is a chemical, it's blue. That is going to be, this is a hydrochloric whatever, and it does this. So you're going to have an awful lot more technical knowledge. So you're going to have to do preparation. So that is, do I up my rate because I've got to allow for time for preparation? Or do I say, I'll do it for a lower rate, but I want a preparation day? I shouldn't be telling you all this really, should I? But that's where you're coming from. So that's the sort of thing you're looking at. So that's really good. Brilliant. And there'll all be lots of things. And it's again, it's a negotiation. Okay.
And
I
also,
remember,
can I just say something?
oh yeah,
Oh, sorry.
Eva,
Something
go on.
regarding, since we're talking about negotiations, I think one thing also to keep in mind is regarding the hours, because it says 9 to 5, but sometimes things happen and they want you to be there earlier, or they want you to stay a little bit after 5. I mean, obviously that's overtime. That probably needs to be considered, agreed on before you take an assignment as well.
Yep, definitely. So, you know, if it goes after, you know, just, I mean, it should have the overtime in your contract, and your contract should say it's 9 till 5 with 1 hour lunch or whatever it might be. But yeah, you're right. Just making sure that if it goes over, because it's discussions like we're doing now, it's taking longer than you think, then yeah, do I get paid, or do I do the first quarter of an hour for nothing, and then after that I get paid, or do I get paid for a full hour, or do I get paid for half an hour? So, you know, some contracts are you get paid an hour, you get paid overtime on an hourly rate as the hour starts. Some are the hourly rate is this, and you get paid in 15-minute chunks, half an hour chunks. So you're right. You've just got to check those things out. It's a really good point. And the more you sort out up front, the easier it is. Okay. Next one then. This is the pharmaceutical one.
It was the group you were in, Elaine.
I was, yeah. I think it was a hard one, this one, wasn't it?
Definitely. Who would like to take the floor just to give some feedback to the rest of the class? I think you were with Elena Dubita, with Luca, as far as I remember.
Elena, Luca, Healing and to leave, yeah.
Come on, don't make me choose. Luca, go on.
Okay. So we talked about the recording, first of all, and we said that perhaps since it's going to be recorded, perhaps our rates should be a little bit higher than usual. But then again, we need to make sure whether our recording is going to be used for internal purposes only, or whether it's going to be made available publicly for external use as well, because that may influence our rate. Then another question that we would ask is how many patients are going to be interviewed during this clinical trial? Obviously, because of what they will be paying us. And then finally, Elaine made us think about something else. That is this the right way of doing things for this specific interview? Wouldn't it be better, say, to transcribe the actual Spanish speech and Spanish interview and then translate it later on, rather than interpreting it beforehand and then transcribe the rendition?
Yeah, that's really good points. You're right. I think the thing is, you've only got 2 hours, and that's one thing you did mention is how long it would take. You've got preparation time and how long it would take if the interview is an hour. You know, you haven't got long. 2 hours is not long to record it and make sure you're happy with it. You're right. The reason I say, is it the right thing to do a simultaneous interpreting and then transcribe it? If the client needs to know exactly what is being said, simultaneous interpreters are brilliant, but they're not going to go word for word. So you have to justify to the client, are you actually trying to do a cheap solution to the fact that you have to have an English version, or, you know, is it going to be acceptable? So that was that one. There was one other thing, and I've completely forgotten what it is. What equipment do I need? All you said there is you need an MP3 file. You need to record it. you need to know what standard of recording. So that one's it's not interpreting, and it's more a case of you need to decide whether it's something you want to get involved in or not. We started off looking at it quite seriously, and by the end we decided to pull it because we just felt that it wasn't really appropriate. You know, it says there, the interpreter's got to change tone as people speak. When you're interpreting, do you have the time to change your voice when, you know, a man speaks and a woman speaks? I've never heard anybody do that. Whenever I've been listening to interpreters, they just keep going. But to be consciously thinking, oh, so-and-so says, I've got to speak in a high voice, or I've got to speak in a low voice. It's, yeah. So there are a lot of questions I would ask on that one, and I did and turned it down. So, yeah. Okay. And then the final one, the remote interpreting, very topical.
Alessia, Lena, Laura, Magda, Martina, who would like to take the lead? That's probably one of the higher interest amongst everyone.
We said that we should ask our client which platform are we using for the conference, the software, and if we have the equipment, or maybe the client will provide us the equipment, even though we said it's not really likely that the client will provide us with the equipment. And then we wanted to ask our client for some documents or presentations, PowerPoint presentations maybe. And then regarding the rates, because the client doesn't want to pay us for the full day rate, we said that we should educate the client, and because he needs to know that we have to do a training, and we as interpreters, we need to prepare. So we're not just spending 1 hour and a half just to do our job, but we need a lot of time. Yeah, that's what we discussed.
Yeah, I think in 5 minutes you've done really well to get all those, don't you, Eva? I think that was brilliant. You're right. We need, and it's a very good question about the equipment. We tend to assume interpreters will provide their own equipment to the level they need, and I think it does need to be seen as an investment, because you don't, if you're working as a freelancer, you don't just work for one company. So it's almost like you've got to have that as part of your equipment. And the same as if you're going to be a public service interpreter, you may need a car to get to one places. And it's a case of investing in something that you will use time and time again. I had an interpreter who did a remote job for me about 3 years ago, and we had this conversation. So she bought a decent set of headsets, an Ethernet cable, and whatever else that was needed. I was talking to her 2 weeks ago, and she said, Elaine, I am so glad you made me buy it, because I'm ready to go. So there, you know, it's, from an agency's point of view, we would assume that if you're going to take on remote jobs, you will be providing that. But it's a good point to ask, without a doubt.
And Elaine, if I just may interrupt, Laura, well done on thinking about it, because I got my equipment 3 years ago, and it was for one particular company for jobs with them, and they really required very expensive equipment. They said the quality is the most important thing, and they paid for my equipment.
Oh, wow, that was good.
Yeah, so that was amazing. And I've been using this equipment for everything, to be fair. So
I've probably forgotten about it now.
There is no harm to ask. You can always ask. The worst thing they can say is no.
But, or you could negotiate and say, okay, well, I'll have a higher rate, but I'll buy the equipment, or I'll have a higher, you know, I'll buy it, but then you need to give me a higher rate for the next 10 jobs to make it worthwhile. There's all sorts of different ways you can do it. Or you buy it for me and I'll give you a discount on each one until I paid it back. Lots of different things you can do. The documentation is really important. I think it's probably more important for remote than it is for face-to-face in some ways, because it's just so different working that way. But yes, you're right. And educating the client, brilliant. I mean, we are not going to pay for an hour and a half. We will be charging the full rate. And you're right to pick up about the training, because the training's several days in advance. So that actually could unless you can negotiate your times right, it could impact other jobs. You know, if you arrange to do a training on Friday at 3 o'clock, and then somebody comes and said, well, I'll come and do a job, can you do a job for me? You are then stuck. So yeah, you've got to take that into account as well. So that was really good. So yeah, so I think those are probably the main things. It's just, this is the sort of questions you'll get asked, and if you can be prepared to ask questions back, it makes our job easier, because we can go back to the client and say, but it also makes it you be able to understand exactly what you're committing to, and that's key, because once you've signed that contract, that's it. You know, you're committed. And if something goes wrong, or if there's something you don't like, it's like you agreed it. You know, if you want to agree cancellation charges, you know, you won't pay cancellation, and if it's cancelled 2 days up to 2 days before the job, as long as you know that when you're signing it, that's fine. But if then something's cancelled 3 weeks in advance and you can't get another job, then that's what you've got to live with. So it's a negotiating thing, and a decision, and understanding what you're agreeing to. So there we go. And I think that must be it, because we've gone over time. So I'm really sorry.
I'm sure students don't mind, because everything was so interesting and so relevant to them, to all of us, to be fair. There is one more question in the chat box. Elaine, if you're happy to answer it.
It's fine, yeah.
And I'm conscious that it's probably your dinner time, tea time.
No, it's fine. Got ages, yeah. I haven't cooked it, so it's all right.
Martina says, thank you again for your presentation, Elaine. I am not entirely sure I have correctly heard. Do interpreters need a specific number of years of experience before getting in contact with your agency?
I would say no. Get in touch as soon as you like, but if you've got no experience on your CV, you probably won't get asked for that much, unless we've got something that's sort of new or different or specialized, or just, you know, just maybe more of a consecutive job, or a public sector job. But if you've got your CV on us, and like I said, you keep in touch. If you've got the CV on the system, and, you know, say, you know, I've done all my practice work with, you know, I've been to London Met, so I've done all the practice ones I do with them. I've done a week's internship in, in the UN or whatever it might be. We know then that you're interested. We know you're there, and just keep plugging away and getting the different experience. And then, you know, when if you've done, say, 3 jobs, you can always send us an email and say, hi, here's my updated CV. You've got me on the system. As you can see, I've now done three works councils, 2 days each, one in the manufacturing industry, one in the service industry, one in insurance. I've done a special course on interpreting figures, and I've worked with Eva, and I've worked with so and so in the booth. And that's the way to do it. It's really hard to get into. I completely see, you know, if I've got, we say 3 to 5 years, because we've got to be able to work with you. The other thing is to say, you know, find us an experienced and simultaneous interpreter who'll almost mentor you and say, well, you know, when you do a half-day job, can I be your other partner, because they can support you through it. You know, and maybe they'll take a longer stint than you take a shorter one, but just it's getting that experience, but keeping us updated on what you're doing. I mean, Eva started off, what did you start off with us? I think it was mental health appointments, wasn't it, you did with us?
Oh yes, because you had this contract in Yorkshire, which I really enjoyed. It was public service interpreting.
So it's almost, you'll start off on doing things, and we've had a lot of interpreters who've done that, or, as I say, they'll do something that's a bit more out of the ordinary, where they're prepared to be more flexible. So it's a consecutive job, but it's with sort of quite senior people, but it's not, you know, the more experienced interpreters wouldn't necessarily need to be done to it. So we can work with you. So it's keeping in touch.
And some of our students, actually, Elaine, they are already qualified PSI interpreters, and some of them are taking the DPSI exam. So that might be an option. But would you say to get in touch with you whenever they graduate, right?
Yeah, when they graduate, send the CV, get your CV together, make sure, as I said, you look at it as if you were, you know, you've seen the sort of things I'm looking for when I've talked to you about what our clients want. Almost look at yourself like you're an agency and say, okay, if I was using this person, what would I use them for? That's the way to do it.
Thank you, Elaine. Do we have another questions? I can't see all of you. Elaine, would you be able maybe to stop sharing the screen? If I
Oh,
can
sorry.
kindly ask you. No, unless there is something
Yeah.
else, and then I can see everyone. Do we have any more questions? This is the time to ask.
Well, if anybody needs to know anything, you know, I'm at RWS, and I think on the presentation.
Oh, actually, yes. Sorry, I told you not to share it, but you've got the details. Yeah. So if you want to share
fine.
it,
I mean, if you want to share it with everybody else afterwards and put my contact details on, that's fine. That's probably the easiest. So yeah.
Okay, I will share the presentation that you delivered. In that case, there is nothing else to do, but just to maybe send some virtual upload. We've got this nice reaction button. If you want to say thank you to Elaine for spending the afternoon with us and advising us, and hopefully, you know, you will all be able to start at some point with some interpreting assignments at RWS. I must say it's one of the best companies, definitely, that I've worked for. And always, you always look after interpreters, which we all appreciate. And we're almost looking forward to those repeated assignments when we see our colleagues from
that's right, yeah. Yeah, they're slowed down at the moment, but yeah,
they will catch up, you know. There will be some
definitely there'll be something.
Definitely, yes. So thank you, Elaine, so much.
Well, thank you, and thank you for everybody's time. As I say, hopefully we can work together in the future.
Definitely. Thank you to all the students, and wishing you all nice evening, afternoon.
Yeah. Okay then. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.